At least 3 people are confirmed dead following a building collapse in Kenya. There are fears the death toll could rise. A play banned by former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe that relives the horrors of his government crackdown in the mid-1980s is finally staged. And Facebook shareholders demand more accountability from the social media giant's leaders. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. At least 4 people are confirmed dead and scores fear trapped after a 5-story building collapsed in a residential area of Nairobi on Sunday. Government officials say the building had been condemned earlier and marked for demolition. They say people living in the building had already been evicted but managed to sneak back in. It's feared the death toll could rise as rescue operations continue. Kenya has seen similar tragedies in the past. Last year, 49 people died when a building collapsed during a heavy nighttime downpour in another neighborhood. The government ordered the demolition of many other buildings following the incident. The National Disaster Management Unit says an inspection is now underway to ensure that buildings the public deems unsafe will be knocked down. Many of those risky buildings are usually in the poor parts of the city. Violent clashes broke out on the streets of Mali's capital on the weekend. Riot police used tear gas to break up opposition supporters, calling for transparency in the next month's presidential election. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta plans to run for re-election in the July 29th polls, despite criticism that he has not cut youth unemployment or ended an Islamist insurgency and ethnic violence in the north. Authorities had banned Saturday's march in Bamako, which was organized by opposition parties. Demonstrators gathered outside the headquarters of an opposition party in the city center, but were met by police carrying riot shields and batons. Several people were injured and taken to hospital amid the clashes. 8 people were arrested. Rising violence across Mali has cast doubt over the feasibility of elections in some parts, especially in the north, where Islamist groups have used the desert region as a springboard for attacks. A controversial play, once banned by former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, has finally been staged in Harare. The play, called 1983 The Dark Years, relieves the horrors of a government crackdown in Matabeleland known as Gakurahundi. Rights groups say 20,000 people died. The story is told through the character of a young woman portrayed by actress Proficiency Kader, who tries to find out what really happened to her parents when they died in the massacre. The crackdown began after Mugabe said his government had discovered hidden weapons of former liberation fighters belonging to PF ZAPU, a movement led by Mugabe's then rival, Joshua Nkomo. Mugabe accused Nkomo of plotting an insurgency. He banned the play during the 2012 census. But following November's de facto army coup against Mugabe, the play's director says he feels now political freedoms are improving in Zimbabwe.
I play the role of a young girl. She doesn't have a name because she doesn't know her identity, which is something that is actually happening in Matabeleland. There are many young girls and boys who do not know who their real fathers are because they were a result of rape that happened during the Gakurahundi. Well, as for playing this role, it was a very big role and it was overwhelming. I feel like I had very big boots to fill.
This is a very sensitive issue, and where we come from in Matabeleland, even only if you term the word Gakurahundi, people will start raising their eyebrows, but who is talking about Gakurahundi? So we as a theatre group, we thought it is the right time to try and trigger this kind of debate whereby we need the nation to actually know what happened.
Well, during Mugabe's near 40-year rule, few families and victims spoke openly about the Gakurahundi offensive, which was carried out by a North Korean trained brigade. For more about the play and the controversy around it, I'm joined in studio by Chris Gande, VOA Zimbabwe reporter. Chris, welcome to Africa 54.
Oh, thank you, Vincent.
Yes. Now, first, there's the whole question about just talking about the issue. To what extent was this suppressed during the Mugabe days?
Oh, it was. It still is, even though, you know, the problem is that shortly after the massacres, then Prime Minister Robert Mugabe ordered an inquiry into the killings. And then a couple of months or a year later, the Chief Justice Chihambakwe then revealed, he didn't reveal, he said that he had compiled a comprehensive report about the killings, but they were never seen by anyone, the reports.
But at the end of the day, this was performed under the ZANU, or rather the ZANU-PF party, right? The ZANU-PF rule, or the Mugabe regime. How is it that the men who are in power today, who are actually part of the Mugabe system, are allowing this to be shown today?
Yes, that's quite ironic, because the president now, Emmerson Mnangagwa, was heavily involved in the government, and of course some say his hands are not clean, but it hasn't been proven as such. But you know, during that time, the president Robert Mugabe had sort of, you know, put a blanket ban on things like that, the Kukurahundi issue and so forth. But with the coming in of Mr. Mnangagwa, he has tried to appear like, you know, someone who is not as high-handed as Robert Mugabe was. But at the same time, you know, it comes back to, you know, he is opening up for himself, you know, because he was involved then. So it's really...
So it could be a double sword there, a double-edged sword, because the elections are just around the corner, right?
Yes.
So if you kind of open up the wounds of those massacres, what could happen? What are the reactions on the ground?
You know, so far it hasn't been really clear, because there was a commission that was set up to deal with this matter. But this commission so far has done nothing. It has tried to hold, you know, public meetings, but because of, especially in Matabeleland, where the massacres happened, people have not been really warm to it.
Now, as we head towards the elections, is this also kind of signifying that the current government of Mnangagwa is actually opening up not only to theater like we are seeing this, but also even in the media? What are you getting from the ground? Is it more vibrant, more open today?
Yes, they are. They've opened, but still the media is still one-sided, especially the government media. But for personnel, for, you know, people, media coming from elsewhere, they are now giving them, you know, the licenses to operate, unlike in the past.
Well, it's good, good signs. So let's hope this continues and we get to hear more from Zimbabwe. Chris, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's Chris Gande, who's a viewer reporter for Zimbabwe. Now, the Initiative for Global Development recently invited representatives of African countries to Washington to meet with U.S. government agencies. They discussed ways to obtain U.S. funding for development projects on the continent. VOA's Caroline Turner has the details.
During a panel discussion, attendees learned they could get help from Washington by partnering with an American small business. Kanini Motuni is the director of the USAID East Africa Trade and Investment Hubs, which are funded by the U.S. government to promote African trade.
We've been able to help these firms become investor ready. So really delving into these firms, helping them improve their governance, helping them improve their financial controls, and then connecting them with U.S. markets and also helping them access long-term debt and equity capital.
The trade hubs have moved away from giving grants and are focused on helping companies access commercial capital.
It's very intensive work to help a company draft its scaling plans, refine its pitches, refine its price models. It's a lot of intensive work, and that's the value that we're adding.
Maltuni says small companies can contact her directly through the website at eatradehub.org.
All we need is an email to find out what exactly do you want to do.
One success was in Madagascar. After a decade of political turmoil caused a drop in vanilla production, the hub was able to organize the vanilla farmers into cooperatives to help them access U.S. markets.
Vanilla is at its highest price at the moment, as you probably know, which is fantastic for what it means for the smallholder farmer. I think prices have almost tripled in the last 7 years. So our intervention was to help organize the farmers, help them understand how to access international markets, and actually move vanilla from Madagascar into U.S. markets through McCormick. And McCormick is the off-taker in this deal. As you know, it's a U.S. firm that uses vanilla and spices in what it produces here.
Since our first meeting, NCBA Closer came and agreed to provide us with technical and financial assistance. Thanks to this partnership, we were granted with material everything to extract and protect vanilla crop in the market. The members of the cooperative are selling vanilla at a bit higher price than the non-members.
Beyond having a stable, steady market that will buy his product, there's a whole host of other benefits for the farmers delivered to him, not only during the harvesting season, but throughout the year. That allows farmers, once they are short in cash, especially during the lean period, to take small loans that's interest-free.
This resulted in a huge win for the vanilla farmers, as well as a fantastic success story from the hub. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. You're watching Africa 54. In a moment, demanding answers from a social media giant. But first, here's a recap of Monday's headlines.
Quel est le chemin de l'histoire?
Well, for Muslims, the month of Ramadan is about self-reflection and prayer. It's also a time for fasting from sunrise to sunset. After sunset, families and friends enjoy a meal called iftar. At a mosque in Virginia outside Washington, people of various faiths came to iftar one evening and joined Muslims in prayer. VOA's Deborah Block has the story.
Here at the Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center in Falls Church, Virginia, Seaton McElroy, who is Catholic, is joining Muslims in worship for the first time.
It was a spiritual experience, certainly, and it's impressive, and I love that I could have that experience with a different faith and still sort of, I don't know, still feel God, even though I'm not in a church.
McElroy is among an interfaith group that were invited to one of the largest mosques in the Washington area for iftar, the evening meal Muslims eat after fasting from sunrise to sunset. Imam Naeem Beg, outreach director at the Islamic Center, says he hopes the people who do not know much about Islam would learn more about it.
I see it as my responsibility to share our faith, to share our values. Just by sitting together and eating itself brings people closer.
Jim Winkler, head of a Christian organization, the National Council of Churches, told the group he looks forward to the day when all faiths are accepted and respected.
This is what we're really supposed to be about as believers, being together, breaking bread, talking and laughing together.
Rabbi Jerry Serrata heads a nonprofit organization of 11 different faiths, which include Islam and the Buddhist and Mormon religions.
If more people understood how much we had in common with other faiths, I think that would go a long way to reducing some of the bigotry that's out there.
Robert Watkin, a pastor at Falls Church, Virginia Anglican Church, teaches a class on building bridges with Muslims. And he brought his students so they could learn more about Islam firsthand.
The first step towards tearing down walls is really beginning to build relationships and getting to know others.
As Sophia Asidram joins other women in prayer at the mosque, she knows how important that is. Since her mother is Catholic and her father is Muslim, she decided to embrace Islam.
So it's definitely challenging coming from a family that is, divided in terms of religion. But I think that for me, the most important thing about it is, and the number one thing that I've taken away from it is kind of the importance of dialogue between the two sides.
More than anything, Imam Beg says, he hopes the interfaith visitors will take with them the beauty of Islam.
The aspect of generosity, the aspect of kindness, the aspect of taking care of your neighbor, the aspect of thinking about those who are not as blessed as we are. And I think this iftar touches upon the humanness of our faith.
Deborah Block, VOA News, Falls Church, Virginia.
Well, Facebook has faced a backlash from customers, regulators, and lawmakers over its handling of user data and its response to reports that foreign actors have used its servers to append elections. Now, it's Facebook shareholders' turn to sound off at the company's annual meeting in California. Michelle Quinn reports.
Outside of Facebook's shareholders' meeting, one man protests the social media giant.
The company's a terrible company, and I think it's a terrible stock to own right now.
His message to Facebook shareholders is simple.
Sell Facebook.
Investors, large and small, file in to tell company leaders what they think. That's particularly true this year in the wake of a user data scandal and reports on how Russian propaganda infiltrated Facebook to influence elections worldwide.
I want to see how Mark Zuckerberg and company are going to handle what happened last year with the infamous political scandal where they used the Facebook data to influence our election.
In recent months, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has faced a barrage of questions about the service.
This has been an intense year.
The company's stock plunged after reports that users' data ended up with political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica. But for some, the crisis was an opportunity.
So I bought the Facebook shares after the Cambridge scandal broke, and now it's going up, and I've had about 13% gains on those holdings.
Natasha Lamb is the managing partner at Arjuna Capital.
What we would like to see is that kind of transparency around reporting, and so that we're not surprised like we've been this past year. Those are disturbing revelations, and it's not something that investors want popping up and experience the drop in market value from that.
Her proposals, one on gender pay equity and another requiring Facebook to report on the content of its site, both lost. But she says it's important to be at the meeting.
The shareholder proposals send a signal to management, they send a signal to the board that they need to pay attention.
At the meeting, Zuckerberg acknowledged a shift in the company's approach.
We didn't do enough to be proactive in looking at how people could try to abuse these tools. The main thing that we need to do right now is make sure that we take a broader view of what our responsibility is to our community.
For shareholders, whether the company's changes can translate into a boost in Facebook's stock price remains to be seen. Michelle Quinn, VOA News, Menlo Park, California.
But China says its trade and business agreements with the United States will be void if U.S. President Donald Trump decides to impose tariff hikes and other restrictions on Chinese imports. The warning was spelled out in a statement Beijing issued after the latest round of bilateral trade talks on Sunday. VOA's Latita Hoke reports.
The United States and China have not settled their trade issues during talks that ended Sunday. A U.S. team led by Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross and including senior officials from the Treasury and Agriculture departments held comprehensive discussions with Chinese trade officials in an effort to decrease Beijing's trade surplus with the United States, which amounted to $375 billion last year. China has agreed to buy more American goods, but on condition that the United States does not impose any new tariffs or other restrictions on Chinese goods sold in the United States.
If that happens, the basis of the consensus reached between China and the United States will no longer exist, which will result in the nullification of the outcomes of this round of consultations.
There were no joint statements following the last round of talks led by Ross and Chinese Deputy Prime Minister Liu He this weekend. But Beijing later issued a unilateral statement praising what it called good communication and positive attitudes on both sides. The statement says relevant details are yet to be confirmed by both sides, but China's attitude remains consistent, says Chinese economist Li Yong, and it includes expanding imports.
It is very helpful to satisfy the Chinese people's pursuit for good life and request for quality economic development by expanding imports, including those from the United States.
The Trump administration has threatened to impose 25% tariffs on $50 billion a year on Chinese technology-related goods and increase duties on up to $150 billion of Chinese imports. China has vowed to retaliate by imposing duties on U.S. goods such as soybeans, corn, and other agricultural products. U.S. farmers are concerned.
If there's tariffs imposed, people think it's just farmers that get hurt. It's the entire community, the entire state, the entire upper Midwest, where agriculture is so important, because we're not living alone out on the farm and not seeing anyone. We are connected economically.
But others say the U.S. economy may benefit in the long run.
In the long term, if you just have a long-term perspective, and this is a long-term industry, I mean, we think in terms of generations, we're going to do fine.
The trade talks have also left two unresolved major issues: how the United States should deal with China's state-imposed industrial policies, and what the Trump administration should do about the Chinese telecommunications company ZTE, which had violated sanctions against North Korea and Iran. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Vietnam's motorbike taxis are seeing their business dry up as customers increasingly opt for ride-hailing services like Uber and Grab Taxi. The expansion of the ride-hailing services across Southeast Asia has shaken up traditional motorcycle taxi services that are a key source of informal work. As elsewhere in the region, motorbikes are Vietnam's main form of transportation, especially in the capital and the southern commercial hub of Ho Chi Minh City. Ride-hailing apps like Uber and Malaysia-based Grab are now elbowing aside motorbike taxis with their Uber Moto and Grab Bike services. Well, next up, a 2017 report by Ocean Conservancy says that just 5 countries, China, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, dump more plastic into the ocean than the rest of the world combined. The theme for this year's World Environment Day is beating plastic pollution. In Thailand, locals and foreigners are working together to try to rid the country's beaches of trash that can include anything from hospital waste to plastic bottles and carrier bags. Plastic can take hundreds, if not thousands of years to biodegrade, which means that it is constantly building up both on land and in the sea. And that's what's trending today. Now, the U.S. attracts the best and the brightest talent from around the world. For many, the path to success is easy and quick. For others, long and challenging. For 2 ballerinas who moved to the U.S. from Ukraine and Armenia, dancing on the American stage has been a dream, and now they proudly call the stage their own. Karina Bafredian has their story.
Sonia Kharatian grew up in Yerevan, Armenia. She always felt comfortable on stage. Watching her parents perform made her fall in love with the ballet and start attending a local ballet school. But after she moved to the US, she realized she would have to learn the art of dancing anew.
When I actually came more into, seeing the companies and how things work here, it was very, very different. Big shock and, different. The way they moved was different in the company, a lot faster, so I had to adjust a lot with my training too.
But hard work at the Washington School of Ballet paid off. After only a year, Sona was invited to join the permanent Washington Ballet Company. The Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland, the main role in Carmen. These are just a few of her star performances. Discipline and busy schedules, hard work and long rehearsals. This is something all ballet dancers know far too well, but Ukrainian ballet dancer Katerina Derechina believes such hardships only make her stronger. Katerina is in her 6th season with the Washington Ballet. She moved to the US in 2001.
I wasn't expecting to stay how I did and work here, but I'm glad that happened, and I got opportunities to do different works, different choreography, and sort of like learning first time contemporary work and modern, and jazz in school was something completely new to me, so it was really great.
But though both ballerinas now consider the US their home, they wouldn't mind returning to their motherlands for a tour.
Yes, I would. I mean, I would love to guest or perform there. I don't know if I would leave back in Ukraine. I haven't been there in a long time. Kind of my life sort of here.
Dance is universal. It has universal language, and no matter where you are, if that's what I chose to do, is my language, so I don't feel like this is my home or that one. As a whole, I can perform here, next day I can go back and dance there or go travel anywhere, and that's, I think, dance unites us all and transcends all them.
In May, Washington Ballet ended its season with Giselle, in which Sona played Bathilde and Katerina Myrtha. Now the company has some time off until September, when the dancers will resume speaking the language of beauty and movement that everyone understands. Karina Befredjian for VOA News, Washington.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings, today Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. So, you know what happy is, and medium comes between small and large.
To find a happy medium.
So, is this idiom about feeling kind of happy?
How is it going with your neighbor? Is he still complaining about your playing the trombone at night?
He was, but it's fine now.
How did you guys work it out?